Hi everyone. I decided to make a video to evaluate what I feel to be top value for gems characters during the Chaos era. And the reason for this is, well, we are coming near to the end of the Chaos era and Lufenia is just right around the corner. And I was actually just going through the units that I built up very recently, and quite a couple of them jumped out to me that they really provided a lot of value to me during my time in the Chaos era, where I could use them over multiple events to complete those events. And I thought, now that we are at the end of the Chaos era, why not share this with everyone else as well? So before I run through what were these characters for me, just going through some quick disclaimers. So this is of course based on banners that were released only during the Chaos era, and the characters that I will be going through are going to be characters that significantly make Chaos fights easier, even many events after their synergy event. And the reason I say this is, of course, almost all characters can be technically Chaos viable once they are fully built up, and you can use any character to across multiple events. But to be included into this video, I picked characters that I used many times, not because I wanted to use them, but mainly because that they will make the fight significantly easier by virtue of their skill sets. And of course, over the whole Chaos era, which is over a year long, there's also power creep, so over time characters and bosses tend to get stronger. So it wouldn't be fair if I try to rank characters, but rather I will go through from early, mid to late Chaos periods. And of course, I did not pull for every single character, so I only want to feature characters that I myself has built up and tested. So to be fair to everyone else, there are probably other characters that once fully built up would make many Chaos fights easier as well, but because I did not have extensive experience with those characters, I tend to choose or include in this video only characters that I myself have used over many Chaos fights. So therefore, this video is of course based on my opinion only. And if you feel for yourself that there are other characters that really saved your skin in Chaos era and enable you to complete many Chaos fights, then of course please feel free to share those characters as well. So that's it. Let's move on to the early Chaos era. So the early Chaos era was at a time where there was a huge difficulty spike, right, coming from Cosmos into Chaos. And it was a time where bosses could first buff their stats when they hit certain HP threshold, which makes it very difficult. In fact, the first few Chaos bosses' defenses were so high that Cosmos related characters were hitting for very low Brave damage. And it was also the time where ingots were a rarity in resources, and it was very difficult to build up many characters to full 3 out of 3. And so the early Chaos fights were quite a challenge to complete with the lack of fully built up 3-3 realized characters. And the first character that I feature here that really helped me a lot was Warrior of Light. So it was one of the first few Chaos characters released, or one of the first few characters whose weapon could be fully realized to 3-3. And his realization was featured in the month of November 2019. He was notable because he was the first realizable tank in the early Chaos era, and as everyone have experienced in the early days, having a tank really makes Chaos fights significantly easier. His shield mechanics really helps to protect the party against AoE brave attacks, which even in fact if you think about all the other tanks available now, not many tanks actually protect the party against AoE brave attacks. So say for example Zek's shield only shields himself, and your other 2 party members are still vulnerable to AoE brave attacks. Likewise with Snow as well, where his brave damage reduction only applies to himself. Galuf, while he can cover a party member, likewise, he can't cover both party members at once, and your party is still vulnerable to brave attacks. Warrior of Light does have a benefit versus those characters where his shield applies to the entire party. So in fights where it's AoE intensive, Warrior of Light actually holds his own even up till today, a year later, as a very formidable tank. In the early Chaos era, though, he was extremely useful, especially at a time where ingots were a scarcity. Just having him at 1 out of 3 realization was actually enough in the early stages of Chaos era, which means that you can just use a book on him, get the free ingot and use the ingot on him, and bring him to the Chaos fight for an easy completion. And later on during the mid-Chaos era, giving him full 3 out of 3 helps him to keep up in terms of damage while still being a very formidable tank. So I've used him in many Chaos fights, even up to the very recent Chaos fight in Edward's event where I used him for the Extreme TCC challenge. Okay, so next up in the early Chaos era, to me, what I feel was a real value for gem character was Ultimacia. She was also released in the month of November 2019, but nearer to the end of the month. And I feature her here because she was one of the first few magic DPS characters realizable in the Chaos era, but beyond that, she also has very turn efficient magic DPS, even up till today's standards. So many people who are unfamiliar with her at the start tend to say that her damage was somewhat lacking, but that's just if you look at the actual numbers on the screen. What you really have to consider is the free turn mechanics her EX gives her, which if you count damage per turn ratio is actually among the top even up till today's standards. And damage per turn is a very important mechanic in Chaos fights, especially early on, because a lot of the Chaos fights had mission objectives where there's very tight turn counts required, and Ultimacia actually makes it very easy to meet those turn requirements. Of course, she also has very strong AoE potential, especially if the bosses in the Chaos fight are weak to a certain element. You can just bring the elemental summon in, summon, and she'll be able to hit for weakness damage inside the summon, which is massive because her Hell's Judgment is a 100% splash AoE damage. So to me, she really helped me in a lot of Chaos fights. I remember at the early stages of Chaos, there were a few, I think that 1 or 2 events before hers where I had to put on hold because I couldn't complete those events. Luckily, they were still ongoing when Ultimacia made her debut, and I quickly went back with her and easily demolished those Chaos fights. So she was the reason why I managed to keep up with all the Chaos fights at the early Chaos era and didn't miss out on any time limited rewards. So for that, she deserves a spot, and I've used her across many events even up till today. And of course, she did receive her LD, which kept her a bit more up to date. But even up till then, there were many events that she really saved me in terms of providing enough damage to meet the turn requirement for the fight. So there were only 2 characters that I feature for the early Chaos era. Coming on to the mid Chaos era, there are 3 characters that I felt were really value for gems. And the first is Aranya Highwind, which featured at the early part of the mid Chaos era. So she was actually released in February 2020, a few months after Chaos have started, and she was notable to be the second global first character released, the first being Beatrix. So she was actually released in the global version of the game before the JP version got her, and she was really released way before her time. Around the time of February 2020, the damage that she does was really just insane. And to give you an idea of how insane it was, I remember back then in the co-op event, the Aranya herself could actually complete the whole co-op event in one turn. So you can just use high wind into AA, into high wind, and into high wind again, and that will actually complete the fight. So the other two players who joined the co-op essentially didn't even get a turn. That really showed how powerful she was. She also went on to be very useful beyond her event, and even many months after her release. So if I consider up till even in the recent months, which is September to October 2020, she was still among the top picks in terms of a viable damage dealing character for the party. Beyond that, right, in the mid chaos fight, even her high boost lance, which is like her converted HP attack, dealt so much damage that it tended to do even more damage than the first skill or second skill that other damage characters have. And I remember during the time of her release that I've used her in many chaos events for a very easy completion. In fact, having Aranya plus a support Aranya really destroyed chaos fights in very, very few turns. Alright, the second character in the mid chaos era is Keys, released in June 2020. And I put Keys here because he has a very notable and unique battery into launch skill in the form of his hero support. And if you think about it, using that skill provides great turn efficient damage that actually bypasses enemy defenses. So when he uses hero support, he batteries the entire party and sets himself up to whoever you selected in your party. Whoever he selects will then launch, and because he battered the entire party, you'll be able to deal good HP damage during the launch. And not only that, when he does an HP damage inside launch, he batteries the party again a second time. So essentially it's two party batteries in one skill use, which is very turn efficient. And because the damage comes in the form of a battery, it doesn't matter if the boss has very high defenses. So in a way, his hero support actually bypasses enemy defense. He also has very great combo potential, so you can use hero support in tandem with characters that also battery the party upon attack. So some notable ones include Amidalayan's LD skill, his Crystal Idol skill, which provides a full party battery before damaging the enemy. So you can imagine if Keys uses hero support on Amidalayan and Amidalayan then uses Crystal Idol, that is a lot of damage. Another great character is Charlotta with her second skill, which batteries the entire party before dealing 3 party members worth of brave damage to the enemy in one turn. And imagine if that launches as well, you then get another 2 follow-up attacks from the other 2 members, usually with capped brave as well. So that's a lot of damage. And he can also combo very well with delayers such as Quistis and General Leo, where their Degenerator Whip and Master Blade respectively delays the enemy, which guarantees a full up launch, as well as provides battery, so the launch tends to deal massive amounts of damage. So Keys has been used, or I've used him in many chaos fights even after his release, even up till today, so that's at least 5 months. And on the JP side, many players have also reported using him in the early Lufenia stages to meet the turn requirements. So being an EX only character at this stage, that is actually quite insane value for gems. So the third character in the mid chaos era is for me definitely Afmal, which was released in July 2020. And I put her here because she's actually a support that pretty much does everything you want in a support. So for example, she provides healing through her converted brave attack. She provides the powerful attack auras to the party. She has a very valuable debuff immunity that not many characters have. To this date, only Lena and Ignis can provide debuff immunity, and among the 3 supports, Afmal is by far the strongest one. She also can debuff speed down on the enemy, which makes the fight much more manageable. And as an added benefit, she also carries a lot of buffs on her as well. And she's also very turn efficient. So her EX still does very nice damage, often hitting between 80 to 99k damage. But beyond that nice massive hit, her EX also provides her 2 free turns after that, which does not add into the turn count. And those 2 free turns, she can still does massive damage while battering the party or slowing down the enemy by applying speed down. So to me, she's a very good support, and she really makes it less likely that I tend to use other supports, though of course there are still places here and there where other supports would come in handy, such as Arciela and Ramza. But among all supports, to me, I really like Afmal the most. Okay, so coming into late Chaos era, and for the late Chaos era, there are also 3 characters that I think are really value for gems. First of which is Emidatalion, released in August 2020. And among all the characters that I feature here, if I were to rank them in terms of the most value for gems, by far I would give the prize to Emidatalion. She has insane value, and the turn deletion mechanic that is unique to her is really broken. If you think about chaos fights, every chaos fight tend to have a boss mechanic that you need to be prepared for. However, Emidatalion just pushes it all aside because there's no point in whatever mechanic a boss has if the boss can never get a turn. And if you bring her along with a support Emidatalion as well, you can ensure that the boss wave in the chaos fight will never get a turn. And this essentially means that having 2 Emidatalions will enable you to complete almost virtually any chaos event. And I say this even if there are chaos events that are feature heavily magic resistant enemy, she actually still does decently well even without an enchanter or impaler. Because if you think about it, her LD actually bypasses defenses because her LD is a straight up 100% gravity brave shaving attack and does damage after a massive party battery, so the damage that it does is going to be the same regardless of enemies' resistances or defenses. Of course her skills will be significantly reduced in damage in magic resisted fights, but it doesn't matter that much because the main reason you bring her in is for the turn deletion anyway, which will still work pretty well. And even her EX would still deal quite okay damage in magic resistant fight, and her EX actually refunds her brave, which will then mean her next attack will still deal okay or decent damage in these magic resistant fights. And the only drawback using her is that she makes the fight too easy, to the point that it's sort of like a brainless fight where you just delete all the enemy's turn and treat the enemy as an HP sponge or a punching bag and go to town with your other 2 characters. So that's really how broken she is. Next up, and I'm sure many people will expect this character to be in, is the king himself, Noctis, released very recently in September 2020. And Noctis, though he's mainly a DPS character and there's many DPS characters, he stands apart because he has Warp Step ability. And Warp Step, although it's primarily used for turn manipulation, so he buffs the entire party where for 2 turns, every turn they take will move their turn before the enemy's turn, and this means that while using his LD, you get essentially 2 turns per character or 6 turns before the enemy can move again, so long as you position themselves appropriately. What's even more impressive is that Warp Step makes it so that the characters do not take a turn count when they do their turns, which is really insane if you think about it. One use of his LD technically guarantees 6 free turns, 2 turns per character, and he has 3 LD users and 1 more in his burst if you manage to get his burst weapon. So in essence, that could be as much as 24 free turns in total, which is insane. So if you bring a Noctis and a support Noctis, that's another 24 free turns total, which is really a lot of free turns involved. And Noctis is also the only character who can enable you to clear chaos content in 0 turns, where many people have done it before, starting from the Ultimate Odin event. And like I've said before, turn count is one of the more important things in chaos fights, due to how much turn count actually contributes to the total score in the fight. And of course, he is still quite a notable DPS unit, especially with his burst weapon, and he is one of the burst weapons that I would consider going all in for. But luckily enough, I managed to get his burst weapon very early on in his banner release. Lastly, if I feature Noctis, I guess I would really have to feature Ardin. In a way, they are very similar because Ardin can also have follow-up attacks through his Warp Strike, but there are also very notable differences that sets Ardin apart. For one thing, his overkill frame buff makes him immortal so long as it doesn't get dispelled, which is really quite cheesy. If you think about it, he can solo many content because he just can't die while his LD buff is up, and you can potentially duo certain contents by putting him in together with Edward, because Edward can put himself into a 100% evasion state through his height mechanic. He has a lot of free consecutive turns as well, and a lot of his kit features re-breaking in a way similar to lightning, which is a form of pseudo delay. And because of this, his damage per turn ratio tends to be in a very high rate as well, which makes him a very notable character that I think I will put him to use in many future events as well. So that's it for the early, mid, and late Chaos era. Before I end the video though, while I was making the slides here, there is one character that I really want to give an honorable mention, and that character is actually Sus. And I couldn't include him because the reason why I wanted to mention about him is because he was really powerful back during the 35 CP era. So this was very early in the game, before the Cosmos era even. So technically he doesn't fulfill the conditions of this video, but I really wanted to give an honorable mention to him because his 35 CP, if you were around back then, was really broken. So if you did not play that early in the game, Global actually brought forward his 35 CP at a time way before Japan actually got his 35 CP, and because of that, his 35 CP was really broken at the time of his release. It boosted his attack boost skill to levels that were far ahead of the era, and it enabled pretty much any character to dish out top tier damage by virtue of the high attack potency buff and especially the 100% crit rate buff. It was so powerful that it actually gave rise to many memes online, so I put some examples on the slide here. And many players end up using him to easily breeze through many of the events at that time, even up to the early Cosmos era. I remember in particular there was one event that was very difficult in Lena's debut event, where it featured the Poison Drake, and many people were saying that it was almost impossible to complete the event if you do not pull for Lena. Because I had Zaz, I actually managed to complete that event using Zaz, Sephiroth, and Tidus or Tidus. But I used a Lena support unit, so in a way I skipped the banner, but Zaz still allowed me to complete the event, which was really tribute to how powerful he was. So I really wanted to at least give Zaz a shout out for that. So in summary, these are the characters that I think really helped me out during the Chaos era, and in TLDR version is these characters are Warrior of Light, Ultimacia, Aranya, Kiss, Ahmao, Lion, Noctis, and Ardin in order of their appearance or release. And to me, having these 8 characters will enable me or many others to complete almost all the Chaos events available, and they are really value for gems or tickets. That's it. So I hope such a video is a good pace, change of pace for many people. To me, it was a good break from submitting chaos fights anyway, and it's I hope an appropriate tribute to characters that, after reminiscing of them, they've really provided a lot of value to enable me to complete many chaos stages around the time of their release. And I hope to continue using them for, of course, future chaos stages as well. That's it. Thank you so much. As always, if you enjoy the video, do leave a like, leave a comment, or subscribe. It really helps out a lot. Till then, I'll see you in the next chaos fight. Bye bye.